right, and welcome to the CODEC Show, everybody. Episode number 2. Welcome, welcome. My name is Peter James, and I am your host here. I am also Professor Peter James here on the beautiful campus of the College of DuPage. We are here located in the suburbs of Chicago, in the suburb of Glen Ellen, and we are one of the largest two-year colleges in the country, and we have great programs here. I got to start out by talking about a professor that I missed last episode, Professor Mary Carlson, who is in the business department. I did not mention her when I was going down the list of all the professors. And I'm also going to give a shout out to Bev Carson, who is also our key administrator in the business department as well. So, again, welcome you all. Thank you for coming to our second episode of CODEC Show. I'm so excited here. Of course, you know our goal here at CODEC is to expose you guys, the students, as well as you in the local community, to entrepreneurs and to entrepreneurs from all around the local community as well as the world. So first, without further ado, actually our second guest is Dan Hattori from Piko Street Kitchen. Did I say that right? Did I say your name as well as your business right?
100% correct.
All right. So welcome, Dan, and thank you for
very
coming as well. So of course, we want to expose students to local entrepreneurs such as Dan, and we're very excited to have him here today because he owns a food truck. And very unique concept, and not a restaurant, and not really even like a booth, but a food truck. And many of us have been exposed to that. And especially, they're very popular right now also. So I'm going to kind of get this kicked off a little bit, Dan. I'm super excited for you to be here. I've been wanting a food truck person here for a long time, so you're the best here. I appreciate you
Glad
coming.
to be here.
But how did you get started on this?
Well, I had a different career to begin with.
Sure.
I was a portfolio manager for a financial asset management company. Was in the business for quite a while, actually became chief operating officer of the company, moved to London, started up a European business, and then in 2012, I retired. And I thought I was just done, I'd be retired, and I would just hang out with my wife. But she always said, no, you're more on a sabbatical than a true retirement. And she was right. After about a year or so of traveling and kind of reflecting on life, I decided, I wanted to do something, and I thought about, what my interests were, what my passion was, and food was something I had a definite passion for. And the other thing I like to do from a business perspective was I like growing businesses, and I kind of put those two things together. I partnered with my cousin. He's the operator of the food truck, and we started Piko in actually like almost 2 years ago today.
So I have to ask you, were you a chef already?
No.
Huh, interesting.
No.
So you like to cook, I'm assuming?
No. I like to eat. I do like to eat. So my cousin, his family was in the restaurant business, and he grew up in the restaurants that his parents ran. His mother, my aunt, is a great cook, and she's the one who developed all the recipes for the truck. And then, so we execute those recipes on the truck.
So you kind of borrowed the recipes, is what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah. You have to find the right partner. That's
I tell a lot of students and a lot of people all the time, very little that we do these days is original. It's okay to borrow and utilize for your own purposes. Sure, give credit where credit is due, but at the same time, feel free to borrow, especially if it benefits you in the long run.
Absolutely. And why make something more difficult and when it's already been done? It's okay to borrow.
So how did the food truck, as opposed to a restaurant storefront, come about?
That's a really good question. So when we went down this kind of decision path, the first thing we looked at was cost.
Sure.
The cost of a food truck, people will say it ranges from about $45,000 to $250,000. I would say the average food truck costs about $100,000 with the purchase of the truck, the retrofitting of the truck, because a food truck is really just a mobile kitchen.
Sure.
Versus a restaurant where a startup cost for a quick service restaurant can run anywhere from $200,000 to $1 million. So since neither one of us had actually run a restaurant, one of our major concerns was we want to decrease the risk, so cost was a factor. The second one, and probably the more important one, is we thought about how do you build a brand. And in 2014, Chicago had just opened up food trucks, to be able to cook on the food trucks in the city. That was like October 2013. So there was only about 35 food trucks licensed in Chicago, whereas how many quick service restaurants are there in the Chicagoland area? Hundreds,
Sure.
thousands?
Right.
So to get noticed 1 out of 35 versus 1 out of 1,000, and it's a no-brainer, it's easier to be identified quickly by various people. And that's one of the reasons why we started the truck. We started with a truck over a restaurant.
So you don't cook in any you cook on the truck, is what I'm hearing you say.
We cook on the truck.
Wow. 'Cause I always thought that most food trucks, they cooked off-site and they brought the food there and then heated it up or something like that. But you...
Some trucks do that.
Sure.
Every truck has to have a commissary to park, clean dishes, store food, and some trucks do cook there. We don't cook at our commissary at all. We do all the cooking on the truck. So like some trucks you'll see, they come on site, they open their window and they're ready for service. We get to the site 90 minutes, 2 hours beforehand so we could prep for that service. So that's kind of one telltale sign of a truck if they're actually cooking on the truck, if they've done something in advance.
So that kind of leads me to my next question. And folks, I'm going to open up the floor to questions in just a little bit. And actually, if you have a burning question, don't hesitate to raise your hand and get the mic, and feel free to ask it in between as well. One of the things I want to ask, so you kind of, it's a mobile truck.
Yes.
And you have to decide where you're going at any given time. You used to do lunch and dinner?
We do lunch and dinner, more lunches than dinner.
Okay.
And this is that's an important point.
Sure.
When we were thinking about whether we wanted to do a brick and mortar or a mobile food truck, we thought, okay, we can go to where the demand is intraday. So, for example, in Chicago, the big lunch crowds will be in the Loop. That's where all the
Sure.
businesses are, right?
Yeah.
But at dinner time, the Loop is deserted.
Empty.
Right? So you want to go someplace else. So you could go to the demand, whereas if you have a brick and mortar restaurant, that's where you're at. And so that was another one of the advantages of a truck over.
So how do you decide when and where to go to, whether it's lunch or dinner? Do you have a certain schedule? Has demand proved better at some locations than other? How do you decide that?
That's a good question.
I'm full of them today, right?
Lots of trial and error.
Right.
In the city, there are 2-3 really hot spots for lunches. So you try to get one of those spots, and it's first come, first serve. In the suburbs, you have to be a little bit more prudent. Typically, what happens is you get invited out by a company or business, and then you try to figure out how many employees they have and what percentage of those employees would want to try your truck. I wish every service was great, but we've learned that some of them weren't that great, and you just don't go back again. It's just one day.
Interesting. So I have a few more questions. Any other questions relative to starting a food truck or just starting a food service business, just in general at all? Yes, sir.
Actually, do you need any permits to sort of park on the street and stay there?
So permits.
Yes.
Permits. Do you need them?
Yes. And permits are the bane of our existence, really. In Cook County, each village or city, you need a permit for.
Wow.
So, Chicago has its own regulations, but then if you go to Hoffman Estates or Schaumburg, you got to get another license for that. In DuPage, the county does it. So you just go to the county, you get the county license, and you could go to every single town in DuPage. Same thing with Will. So the only county that is more cumbersome will be Cook than all the other ones, but yes.
Of course.
Now, after the permits, startup costs, type of truck you want to get, the equipment, do you have a rough idea of how much that money will require for that?
So the question was, of course, how much money it would cost after the permits and after
Yes.
getting everything settled as well? Yeah, it's a good question.
So after the truck cost.
Yeah.
Once the truck is built out, that's your major expenses. So now what you're really talking about is you have insurance, and that will run somewhere between $500 and $1,000 a month.
Is that standard restaurant insurance, or?
Yeah, well, plus you have a vehicle as well, so
or is it
that's
auto insurance? Right?
it's a combination of both. It's a combination of both. That's why it increases the cost.
Wow.
You have workers' comp insurance when you have employees, so you have employee costs. You'll have a commissary cost, so since you have to park somewhere, every village, every county in the city of Chicago requires that, so you have to have a relationship with the commissary, and then it's food, and that's the major cost for the truck, and gas and propane.
So let me piggyback on that. Would you say it's easier to start a food truck than it would be a brick and mortar restaurant, from your perspective?
Yeah. It's easier to start a food truck because brick and mortar, location is so important, and it can take forever to find the right location.
Yeah.
Whereas with the truck, there's hundreds of used trucks out there, and then you just have to retrofit that truck into a mobile kitchen. So from that perspective, a truck is a lot easier.
Yeah, interesting.
How many trucks are you running right now?
We are running one truck. I get this question a lot, and one of the reasons is the city of Chicago, the ordinances are much more restrictive than any other major cities in the U.S. So in Chicago, you can technically only park for 2 hours at a time for a service, which is ridiculous because, you look at any restaurant, their lunch is not from 11 o'clock to 1 o'clock, it's 11 o'clock to 2 o'clock. Right? So that's restrictive. The second thing, and this is also difficult, is you cannot park within 200 feet of a food establishment in Chicago. And a food establishment could be a 7-Eleven or a Walgreens and things like that. So, with those two gating factors, it's difficult to find parking. And that's why we have not grown as quickly as I would have liked.
Have you ever thought of expanding or perhaps moving to a different city to sell them?
We have thought about that. The complexity with that is you need someone in that city that you trust, right? And right now it's my cousin who's my partner and myself running the business. And you have to find that right person in that other city. And we have not done that yet.
So I have a really quick, a good question. I think it's a good question anyway about, so you didn't have the food service background or culinary background more or less, but you knew you wanted to do this. So did you surround yourself with certain friends, mentors, maybe somebody who had a food truck before and kind of showed you the ropes a little bit, or did you jump in raw, you and your cousin, nothing?
Sure. I kind of look at that in kind of three different parts, right? You have the business part of the business, which is finances, which is food procurement, things like that.
Sure.
And I was comfortable with my background that we could cover that piece of it. As far as the second piece of it is the actual food that we were serving, and that's one reason why I wanted to partner with my cousin and his mom, because she was the one who had the expertise in the flavors that we wanted to profile on the truck. And then the third component of that is the food truck business itself. We had no experience with it, and it's relatively new in Chicago when we started it in the Chicago area. So what we did two things. One, when we decided to build our truck, we went through one of the established food truck owners in Chicago already.
Okay.
And so he then became, if you give them business, you develop a relationship with them, and we develop a friendship. So he helped guide us in Chicago. The second thing we did is our commissary was originally in Schaumburg, and we partnered with another food truck owner who's the biggest food truck in the suburbs.
Right.
And once again, because of that relationship, he became a mentor as well. And those were two decisions that I think worked out well for us, and they became our mentors within the industry itself.
And the reason I asked you that, because I think it's so important for an entrepreneur or a small business owner to have partnerships or advisors or mentors that can really help them to achieve the level of success that they're looking to get to as well. Explain the commissary concept for those of us who may not understand and that may not be in food service.
Sure.
I think I know it, but I may not be on the same page as you.
So a commissary is basically a commercial kitchen that can be used by outside parties. So a food truck can partner with this kitchen and store their food, can cook there if they needed to. And in a number of cases, that commissary also has parking for the truck. So there's only a few commissaries in Chicago area. And that is probably another gating factor for why you haven't seen more trucks in the area, is that there's not enough commissaries to allow the industry to grow at the moment. So it's an opportunity.
Interesting. Very interesting. Any more questions? Yes.
Regarding, do you think that there's a saturation issue, or do you think that, I mean, do you think there's still plenty of room in the food truck industry, or do you think it's getting to this point where it's at its peak, and meaning numbers of trucks?
Sure.
So the saturation question, more or less.
If Chicago, depends on the Chicago, for the city of Chicago, it depends on the ordinance. If they were to open it up a little bit more, I think the demand is there for, a significant number of additional trucks, plus the commissary, right? In the suburbs, I think there's a lot more room for it to grow. The key with that is you have to identify the businesses that will allow you to park in their lot and who will promote your truck. So what you see a lot of times in the big office buildings is they have a cafeteria within the building, and because of that, they can't allow a truck on site, or they can, once a summer, something like that, a special occasion. So the demand is there. It's just sometimes there's some opportunities that are blocked because of existing business relationships.
You've been retired.
Yes.
So this is your after your retirement job.
Yes.
You've been involved in it 2 years now.
Yes.
Are you glad you got into it?
Yes.
Because right now you might be invested enough to where you decide, well, I have to stick with it now. But would you still do it again? I guess is what I'm saying.
Yes. I mean,
Would you do it again? That's a good question.
I would do it again. From a financial standpoint, the truck is performing better than what we had modeled.
Good
So
for you.
that's a good thing.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you. But as I thought about this, I think passion is really important whenever you start any type of business.
Yeah.
And food is something I'm passionate about. And actually a couple things. One is when you serve someone and then they come back later that day and they say that they love this, and there's one example where one guy came to the truck, he ordered one ribeye taco, and he was nervous about ordering it. It's called bulgogi ribeye tacos, and wasn't sure what that was. He ate it, came back, ordered 3 more, came back again and brought 3 of his friends and ordered 12 more orders. So when you get, from that example where people like your food, there's a sense of fulfillment with that. The second thing is we have 3 employees on our truck who make their living off of working on the truck, and you create not only a business for yourself, but you're also creating an opportunity for other people to make money and live off of that, and there's a sense of fulfillment with that.
Talk about any downsides. So, and you've alluded to some already, some of the challenges in scheduling and things like that. And I always like for our students and our viewers to know about the challenges that it takes to run a business. In this case, I know anything with food service, there's lots of different ones. Give us a few of them, if you don't mind, that you've experienced.
One, it takes a lot of work. For a typical lunch service, which will be from, say, 11 o'clock till 2 o'clock, somebody will arrive at the commissary around 7:30, 7:45, because they have to take things that are in the refrigerator at the commissary and move it to the truck, and then drive the truck, which is now parked in Skokie, into the city. And then you have to prep, then you have service, then you have to drive back to Skokie, then you have to clean the truck and everything. So for a 2.5 to 3 hour lunch service, that person is at the commissary at 7:45 and they leave at 4:30. So it's a full day, and that's just for a lunch. this past weekend we were at a festival here at College of DuPage, and that was from 12 o'clock to 8 p.m. And we had people on site by 10 o'clock, and people didn't leave until 11 p.m. So there's lots of hours involved. And you're always going to have problems and issues. Whenever the truck is out, there's potentially a problem. like right before coming here, I got a call saying our generator was out and we were out of service. And so you're constantly involved with the business, even though you're not on the truck.
Yeah.
So.
For those of you who did not go attend the COD 5K and food truck rally this past weekend, you missed a grand time. There was probably a number, at least 10 to 15 food trucks there on site, to include yours as well. So you definitely missed a treat. I could not even get in line because your line was super long.
It got long, and I'm always kind of sheepish when that happens. I'm always thinking about what the customer experience is, and we've had lines that were 90 minutes long, and that's just, I don't like it that long. Give me a 5-person line all day, I'll be happy with that. I don't need a 30, 40, 60-person line, because people wait too long and their experience kind of suffers because of that.
And they get agitated and things like that as
Sure.
well. Yes, yes, indeed. Any more questions from the studio audience? Yes, sir.
Actually, that's related to a question I had. When you have the truck out and everything, how you have 3 workers you set on the truck, how does everybody handle high volume? Because I imagine lunchtime, everybody's hungry.
Yes.
And high volume can be stressful all the time anyway.
Yeah, stress and heat too. The truck is not air conditioned, and so it tends to be about 15 to 20 degrees hotter inside the truck than it is outside.
Wow.
So we have 4 to 5 people inside the truck working a busy lunch service, and you're talking about the bed of the truck is 16 feet long, and the width is maybe 3.5 feet, where you walk back and forth. So you have to like the people you're working with, because you're bumping into them all the time and sweating on them and everything. So.
Good question. Very good. Any more questions at all?
Now, you had mentioned about catering, with catering being a little bit more preferred than standard lunch operations.
It's different, right? Yeah. Catering, and you can do catering 2 separate ways. One, you can just drop off a preset order number of foods, or you can go on site and have a guarantee for X dollars of sales. You can run the full menu, and then you might get to a point where you exceed, and you go above that. The nice thing about catering is what your minimums are going into that day, as opposed to when you go on the street or go to a building, you just don't know. And also weather too, right? Food truck business is it's a very seasonal business. Yesterday it rained, and business is down 30% just because it rained.
Wow.
And whereas a catering event, you know what your numbers are, and it's not weather affected as much.
Right. And running it as a catering would be just as if you were running a standard catering organization, but mobile.
Sure. So the advantage of it is you can cook on the truck and deliver that food within, I don't know how many feet of where people will actually be eating. Whereas if you're running a catering company, either you have to go into someone else's kitchen that you're not familiar with, that you might not be able to do everything you want to do, or you cook something somewhere else and you bring it there. So the food is never as good as when you cook it someplace else. So.
One more question from the studio audience as well.
So when you first started, was it you and your cousin cooking, or did you guys hire people right away?
We hired one person who had restaurant cooking experience. The first day we went out, it was a 4-person crew. We had never worked together, even practiced, because there were so many problems getting the truck ready that we just had to go out. And I can still remember this. We did 164 orders between 4 p.m. and 10 p.m. It was a food truck event. And we were so proud of ourselves that we went through this, even though there were long lines and things like that. Today, we could do 164 orders in about an hour and a half.
Wow.
So that's just kind of shows you how much improvements and efficiencies you can gain over time.
Good stuff. So I have a couple of questions just to wrap things up as well. So you started out in corporate, now you're kind of a small business owner, entrepreneur. What are some of the things that you maybe attribute to your personal success, the success of the food truck, just in general, that maybe you could share with our audience here?
Sure. I think if you want to be an entrepreneur, the first thing you have to do is you have to be an optimist, because starting up any business, the odds are probably against you day one, right? So you have to be an optimist, but I also say you have to be a realist as well, because you just by saying, I think I could do something, I know I can do something, doesn't mean that you're going to be able to do it. And at certain points in time, you have to say, okay, why isn't this working if it's not working? And you have to be willing to cut your losses or change directions or change strategy. And if you're just totally blinded by saying, I can do this way, you might be suffering in the long run because of that.
You have to be adaptable, what I'm hearing you say.
Yes.
Yeah, indeed.
I think the second thing is you have to have a vision, right? Because when you start a business, what's in front of you that day is nothing, right? The vision is what it can be, what it will be, what it could be, and everything's in the future. And even when you have a business up and running, it's not, well, this is what it's going to be like forever. What's the next step? How can we grow? So it's always thinking about, what you could do next and how you can grow it. So you have to have vision just beyond today, tomorrow, next week.
Indeed. What's next, I think, is a good mantra for sure. And being adaptable is huge. So now let me take you back a little bit. You are anywhere from 19 years old to 23 years old, and you're college age or getting ready to wrap up college or in the middle of college for that matter. Knowing what you know now, what would you do differently? What would you do in life? And this is very beneficial to our students here who may be thinking about it, maybe a little bit tentative about it. What would you do differently now, or what advice may you have for them as well?
I think learn about yourself and what drives you and what your passion is in life, and then gain the skills and the tools that will allow you to do what you want to do. I think that's, if I had to go back, and I'll tell you, I've had a very checkered college career. I went to 4 schools, undergraduates, before I graduated. I went to College of DuPage. I sat in these chairs. They weren't as nice when I was here, and the facilities were not as good, and clubs like this did not exist, so you guys are lucky. I've had a number of different careers, and I think if you learn about yourself and what interests you, and then try to figure out what kind of tools you need to do what you want to do, it can save you a lot of time, and maybe that will allow you not to get stuck in a career that you don't like or don't want to do, but you have to do because you make X amount of money. So that's the one big piece of advice I give myself.
And I have to concur with you. Many of us look at the College of DuPage as just a place to come take classes, but there are so many resources that are available here on campus, from the library, business library, small business development center that is also here on campus that helps businesses in the local community launch and take off. All these resources, and a lot of them, most of them are free resources, but why doesn't everybody use them in order to achieve the success that they can as well? Let's give Dan Hattori a hand, folks.
So thank you.
Thanks. Dan, I can't thank you enough for coming. Episode 2 of the CODEC show. I truly appreciate it. And folks, thank you for all for coming as well, in studio audience, as well as our viewers out there in the world. Thank you so much, and have a great day. See you next time.
Thank you.